All right, so tonight as we discuss the origins of humanity and, from my perspective, intelligent design, it is my intention to showcase that intelligent design is not only the most plausible conclusion for our existence, it is also the most logical explanation for the existence of all life as we know it. As people have heard before, I call Darwinism, the Darwinian evolution through natural selection, the greatest scam on earth for a very important reason. As we progress through the evidence against this being a logical, plausible, and probable explanation for our existence, the level to which philosophers and academic elites use it to dismiss a higher intelligence will become clear. Now, obviously, this debate will go in many directions, but before we even get to the fallacies of Darwinism, we must first address what I argue makes the entire premise of evolution fruit of a poison tree, and that is abiogenesis. My opponent will likely argue that, it was a much simpler back then than what we view as life now. And she may even attempt to explain the improbabilities away by saying life exists, therefore the probability is actually 1. However, let us consider if that position of potential explanation for the prerequisites needed for the theory she stakes her life on is remotely plausible to occur in an undirected manner, or if in order for the probability to be 1, the rational conclusion is an intelligent agent. So even if simpler parts somehow came into existence, this does not circumvent the requirement for a minimum number of these parts to all exist at the same time in the same specific location. And while atheists, origin of life researchers try to avoid this conundrum, it is just not that unavoidable. So let's now consider what is recognized as the simplest form of life and how its simpleness by comparison to other forms of life does not mean it is actually simple. The simplest known organism, the Mycoplasma genitalium, has a genome of 580,000 base pairs. This astonishing number enables it to contain 470 genes that code for 470 proteins, with an average of 347 amino acids per protein. The odds against just one specified protein of that length are 1 in 10 to the 450th power. If we calculate the entire proteome, then the odds are actually 1 in 20 to the 164,090th power. And this is without accounting for the increased improbability when you consider that nature had to select only the left-handed amino acids and bifunctional ones. All of this is before considering all of the genes must have also been in existence at the same time in the same location on a chaotic prebiotic Earth in an environment that is admitted to be less advantageous for the required chemical reactions to occur. So now let's put this in context. The total number of seconds to work with in the entire history of the universe is only 10 to the 18th power. The total number of particles in the entire universe, not just here on Earth, is 10 to the 80th power. And the total number of interactions by those particles in the history of the universe is 10 to the 143rd power. And all of this is before considering the origin of the genetic code, the assignment of arbitrary values to codons to equal amino acids, and the requirement of DNA and transcription proteins and translation proteins to exist simultaneously, even for basic replication to occur. What is ironic about this is that I am barely scratching the surface regarding the incredible number of variables which must operate in unison for life to exist. So as you're considering all of these pieces of evidence, ask yourself, is it more reasonable to conclude that an external intelligent agent was needed for life to exist, or to imagine something that is obviously impossible to have occurred by chance somehow did occur by chance? We are surrounded by things which have similar improbabilities to occur through chance, such as the technology enabling us to have this debate. Yet we readily accept that the barrier can easily be overcome by an intelligent agent. Now, what would be impossible by any other standard is now 100% plausible and possible. Now, in regards to our technologies, information theory and computer science are fundamental requirements in order for any of this to be possible. Yet even though the exact same systems are required in biology, the root requirements for their origin in any other context are ignored. So let's now consider the DNA enigma. It fulfills all the parameters of a code. It has arbitrary values, has a code table, it has translation, which equals arbitrary values, codons equaling amino acids. The codons are translated by ribosomes. Codons do not become amino acids. Codons do not chemically interact with the amino acids. It also fulfills the parameters of programming. Input, output, loop controls, codons, syntax, space and time expression, semantics, controlled variable outcomes, pragmatics, if then else function. It's even been determined to be Turing complete. So when you really start to think about this, you come to the logical argument. So therefore, if information is immaterial and non-random information requires an intelligent agent, then intelligent agents are required for all controlled process instruction. If non-random functional information requires a mind, and DNA genetic code contains non-random functional information, then a mind was required for genetic code to exist. If codes require intelligence to assign arbitrary values, and decoding requires equal arbitrarily assigned values, and a genetic code is encoded, transferred, and decoded, and genetic expression requires translation of arbitrary values, then the logical conclusion is a mind was required for the genetic code to exist. If time-based controls, which we'll cover later, are required for code execution and are executed by separate functions, and they modify outcomes based on temporal variables, and they require simultaneous execution, then foreknowledge of the outcome is required. If programming requires if, then, else logic rules, and syntax, semantics, and pragmatics are required for its execution, and biological cells contain all of these and the tools for its execution, and if no other programming would happen by undirected process, then an intelligent agent is required for the initial programming. Therefore, if in any other context it is accepted that non-random information, coding, decoding, programming, time-based controls, and nanomachines require intelligent agents to exist, and if life requires all of these to exist, and all observed organisms do, then an intelligent agent, and therefore, in my opinion, God, is the logical conclusion for our existence. Now, I must next address neo-Darwinism directly. And here are 5 positions which challenge the premise of undirected evolution through natural selection being a logical, plausible, or probable conclusion for our existence. First, adaptation of existing functions to account for environmental condition variance is primarily executed through epigenetic factors which do not result in new core functions. This is a known fact, and the epigenome is a fundamental element which has shaken the entire premise of evolution to its core. Not only are these adaptations the result of variable gene expression caused by epigenetics, they are not the result of mutations. Rather, are controlled modifications executed through read, write, and erase nanomachines. Second, it is my position that macroevolution is not proven by speciation, nor by variance within species. While Darwinists attempt to explain this with very slow changes over time, it is now known that literally thousands of genes and gene regulatory networks working in synchronicity are required for new body plans to exist. Not only must they work in unison, it has been shown extremely minor modifications are fatal in embryo development. While I do not discount that variations can occur on a contained level, it is my strong contingency that these are the result of reorganization and adaptation of existing data and functional capacity, not the creation of new information or functions solely through random mutations and natural selection.
You've got 2 minutes, John, 2 minutes.
Almost done. Third, the variation of transcription factors and gene regulatory networks results in significant difference in gene expression. To date, the most studied of these are in relation to cognitive function and show 9 to 23% of variation between chimps and humans, for example. It has been shown these differences must work in unison, and any degradation of this, even to the level of point mutation, results in dramatic impairment or death. Not only does this showcase the extreme importance of gene regulation, it also decimates the relevance of similar coding gene sequences in relation to final outcome. Moreover, the significant differences in non-coding regions of the genome become apparent for things ranging from introns, retrotransposons, enhancers, and promoters, to name a few, almost all of which have been dismissed by those against intelligent design. However, the discoveries made in the last decade have now made their relevance unavoidable. Fourth, it has now become apparent through structural biology that not only is the prescriptive sequence information housed in the genetic code required, it must also be geographically coordinated through dynamic real-time folding to enable full gene expression. This applies to interchromosomal data transfer and gene regulation, which not only forces acceptance of physical gene locations to be vital, it also decimates the relevance of similar sequences existing in other organisms. I'm going to skip 5 and go straight to the conclusion. If I asked you for the source requirement for any piece of technology that contains coding, logic gates, programming, nanomachines, and exhibits temporal controls which defy simple cause and effect outcomes, before even accounting for the physical structures required for the execution being in a specific place at a specific time, yet insisted they'd all come into being without an intelligent agent being required, would you think I was exhibiting rational thought, or could even be taken seriously? Therefore, it is my position that the existence of life by undirected physical process, without the action of intelligent agent, is not only neither logical, plausible, or probable, but impossible. As you consider these arguments and the expansion of them throughout the debate, ask yourself this: whose position is more rational? Is it those who conclude it is a more logical, plausible, and probable conclusion that these things could not occur by chance? Or those who argue, no matter how counterintuitive it is, you must believe this could all happen without an intelligent agent being required?